Hi everyone, I'm Maddie, 29, and, well, let's just say my family is complicated. Growing up, my parents weren't the nurturing type. They did the basics, fed me, clothed me, made sure I didn't fall behind in school, but they always made it clear that I should be eternally grateful for their sacrifices. My dad, Mark, loved to remind me how lucky I was to have a father like him, always punctuating his lectures with, "You'll thank me someday." Meanwhile, my mum, Linda, had a knack for guilt trips, often saying things like, "After everything I've done for you," whenever she wanted something. And then there's Ryan. My younger brother, 4 years my junior, has always been the golden boy. He's charming, carefree, and could do no wrong in their eyes. Growing up, I was the one with responsibilities. Getting a job at 16, helping out around the house, and keeping my grades up. Ryan, he was allowed to coast. Even now, at 25, he's still living at home, spending most of his time gaming or hanging out with his girlfriend, Kylie, while my parents excuse every one of his shortcomings. He's still figuring things out, they say. Funny, I was figuring things out while working 2 jobs and paying rent. After my marriage ended a few years ago, I had no choice but to move back in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few months to save up and get back on my feet. But temporary turned into a year. Living there again felt like stepping into a time machine, back to when I was a teenager under their roof. Dad's constant lectures about how I needed to get my act together became a daily occurrence, and Mom's passive-aggressive digs reminded me exactly why I'd left in the first place. Then came Christmas, the day everything changed. I came home from my part-time job one evening, exhausted, only to find the living room full of suitcases. My parents and Ryan were buzzing around, packing clothes and toiletries. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my bag down. "We're leaving for Italy tomorrow," Dad said without even looking up. I froze. "Italy? Since when?" Mum gave me a look that could curdle milk. "Since we planned it weeks ago. We wanted to spend Christmas somewhere special this year. Ryan's been so excited." "Wait, so you're all going?" I asked, still trying to process. "Of course," Dad said matter-of-factly. "It's a family trip." Family trip. The words hit like a slap. "So I'm not invited?" Mum shrugged, her tone almost bored. "We didn't think you'd want to come. Honestly, with how things have been, we didn't think you could afford it." Ryan, lounging on the couch with his phone, chimed in. "Yeah, and it's not like you've been the most fun to be around lately." I stared at them, anger and disbelief bubbling under the surface. "You could have at least told me." Dad sighed, clearly impatient. "Look, it's not a big deal. Maybe if you got your act together, we would have considered paying for your ticket. Next year, maybe." Next year. As if I'd want to spend another Christmas with them after this. The next morning, they left without so much as a goodbye. I sat in the empty, silent house, staring at the wall and trying to wrap my head around it all. It wasn't just about the trip. It was everything. A lifetime of being second to Ryan, of being treated like an afterthought in my own family. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just one Christmas, right? But as the day went on, the weight of it settled over me. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was my breaking point. Something had to change. When my parents returned from Italy a week later, I expected the usual post-vacation smugness. Stories of lavish meals, scenic tours, and how amazing the trip was. And they delivered. Mum walked through the door with her suitcase in one hand, and her phone in the other, scrolling through photos to show me before she even took her shoes off. "Oh, Maddie, you should have seen it. The Colosseum at night is just breathtaking. We had the most unforgettable time." Ryan strolled in behind her, carrying nothing but a souvenir bag. "Best trip ever," he said with a grin, dropping the bag on the kitchen counter. "Kylie loved the photos I sent her. She's dying to go next year." I forced a tight smile. "Sounds like you had a great time." Mum nodded enthusiastically, completely missing the sarcasm in my voice. "Oh, we did. It was such a nice break from all the stress. I think we really needed it." "You needed a break," I thought. I bit my tongue, choosing silence over the argument brewing inside me. I couldn't trust myself to respond without letting my frustration spill over. They didn't even notice. The next day, Dad called a family meeting, which, in our house, always meant they wanted something. I sat at the dining table with Mom, Dad, and Ryan, already dreading whatever was coming. Dad leaned back in his chair, folding his arms like he was about to say something profound. "We've got some exciting news," he began, glancing at Ryan. "Your brother proposed to Kylie while we were in Italy." Mum clapped her hands together, beaming. "It was so romantic, right in front of the Trevi fountain." I blinked, taken aback. "Oh, congratulations, I guess." Ryan grinned, as smug as ever. "Thanks, Maddie. It's going to be the wedding of the year." That's when Dad cleared his throat. "Now, about the wedding. It's going to be expensive, of course, and Ryan and Kylie are young. They don't have much saved up yet, so we're all going to pitch in." "Pitch in?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Yes," Mum said, as if it were obvious. "Weddings are a family effort, and we want to make sure Ryan and Kylie have the celebration they deserve. I leaned forward, trying to stay calm. How much are we talking about? Oh, not much, Dad said casually, waving his hand. $17,000, your share, I laughed, an incredulous, bitter laugh. You want me to give $17,000 for Ryan's wedding? It's not just for Ryan, Mum said, her tone turning condescending. It's for the family. And you've been living here rent-free for over a year, so it's only fair. I've been paying for groceries and utilities since the day I moved back, I snapped, and working non-stop to save up so I can get out of here. How is this fair? Ryan rolled his eyes. Come on, Maddie, don't be so dramatic, it's just money. Easy for you to say when it's not your money, I shot back. You don't even pay for your own food. Dad frowned. Maddie, this is an opportunity to step up for your family. We've always supported you. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Supported me? Like when you left me alone on Christmas while you all went to Italy? Or when you spent my whole life putting Ryan first? I'm done. I'm not giving you $17,000. The room went silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom's face twisted into a mix of shock and anger. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you. I stood up, my hands trembling with frustration. You've done plenty for Ryan, but for me, you've done nothing but make me feel like I'm never good enough. I'm not giving you a dime, and I'm done letting you guilt me into thinking I owe you. Without waiting for their response, I turned and walked to my room, slamming the door behind me. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I paced the small space. I knew I'd crossed a line, but for the first time I didn't care. Something inside me had shifted. I was done being their doormat. As I stared at the stack of moving boxes I'd started packing weeks ago, I made a decision. I wasn't just done with this conversation, I was done with this house. It was time to leave for good. A week after the argument, things in the house were tense. My parents barely spoke to me, and Ryan avoided me entirely, which suited me just fine. I focused on work, quietly saving every penny and packing my things whenever they were out. I thought the worst was behind me, that I could ride out the tension until I left. But of course, I underestimated them. It happened on a Friday evening. I came home from work to find Mum and Dad waiting for me in the living room. Their expressions were tight, and Ryan was slouched on the couch looking unbothered. Something was up. Sit down, Maddie, Dad said, his tone stern. I hesitated but obliged, setting my bag on the floor. What's going on? I asked cautiously. Mum folded her hands in her lap, her voice overly sweet in that way it always was, when she was about to say something awful. We've been talking, and we've come to a decision. Since you don't want to contribute to Ryan's wedding, we think it's time for you to start paying full rent. Effective immediately. I blinked, trying to process. What? I already help with groceries and utilities. Why now? Dad leaned forward, his face serious. Because you've been living here for free while disrespecting this family. It's time you pull your weight. I stood up, my voice rising. Pull my weight? I've been working non-stop to save up and get out of here. And now you're trying to punish me because I won't fund Ryan's wedding. Mum sighed dramatically, as if I was the unreasonable one. This isn't punishment, Maddie. It's about fairness. Ryan and Kylie deserve our support, and you're not stepping up. You've got to be kidding me, I said, laughing bitterly. Ryan doesn't even pay for his own gas, and you're telling me I need to step up. Ryan finally looked up from his phone, smirking. Maybe if you weren't such a cheapskate, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That was it. I snapped. You think I'm cheap? I've been breaking my back to support myself and cover bills in this house while you sit around doing nothing, and you want me to pay for your wedding? You're unbelievable. Before anyone could respond, I turned toward the hallway, but Dad's next words stopped me in my tracks. We've already taken care of it. I froze. What does that mean? Mum exchanged a nervous glance with Dad, but he pressed on. We accessed your savings account. There wasn't enough, but we're working on covering the rest. My heart stopped. You took my money? It was just sitting there, Mum said quickly, her tone defensive. You weren't using it and we thought— You thought what? I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. That you could just steal from me? That's all I had. That was my way out of here. Dad stood, his tone sharp. Lower your voice. We're your parents. We've sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us. By being selfish. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Selfish. You stole from me. You didn't even ask. You just decided that Ryan's wedding was more important than my future. Ryan snorted from the couch. Calm down, Maddie. It's just money. You'll earn it back. I spun around to face him, my voice shaking. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about money. It's about the way you've all treated me like I don't matter. Like my life is just a backup plan for when Ryan needs something. I'm done. Mom stood, her voice panicked. Maddie, wait. Let's talk about this. No, I said firmly, grabbing my bag. You've talked enough. I'm leaving. And where will you go? Dad challenged. You don't have enough to survive on your own. I turned to face him, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. I'll figure it out. But I'd rather struggle alone than stay here another second. With that, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, My hands were shaking as I drove to my new apartment, my mind racing with a mix of anger, heartbreak, and determination. They'd crossed a line I couldn't forgive, and for the first time, I truly understood. I didn't just need to leave, I needed to cut them off for good. It was time to start over on my terms. The aftermath of my defiance was swift and brutal. I'd barely settled into my small apartment when the calls started flooding in. First, it was my mum, leaving a voicemail, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. "Maddie, this isn't how family operates. You can't just walk out like this. Come home, we need to talk." I didn't call her back. The texts came next, one after the other, each more accusatory than the last. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, you're throwing away your family for your pride. This is the last time we'll ever help you." I ignored them all. It wasn't long before my dad left a voicemail too, his tone colder than I had ever heard. "Maddie, we tried to help you, and this is how you repay us. You've always been difficult, always ungrateful. Don't bother coming back." I listened to the message once, then deleted it without a second thought. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't going to be guilted into submission, but the silence, even though it was my choice, still felt heavy. I spent my first few days in the apartment unpacking and trying to establish some sort of routine. My mind was filled with questions I didn't have answers to. Am I making the right choice? What if they're right? I tried not to think about the emptiness of the apartment, the fact that I was starting over from scratch. It wasn't easy, but I knew deep down that staying in their orbit was a form of self-sabotage. Then came the confrontation. A week after I moved out, Ryan showed up at my door. I was sitting on the couch, eating takeout, when I saw him standing outside my window. His hands were in his pockets, his expression guarded. I knew what this was about. I opened the door, leaning against the frame. "What do you want, Ryan?" He glanced down, his eyes avoiding mine. "We need to talk." "About what?" "You've got everything figured out, don't you?" I could feel the bite in my voice, the anger rising again. "I'm sorry, okay?" he said quietly, finally meeting my gaze. "I screwed up. I should have stood up for you. I should have told them to back off, but I didn't. I've been a coward." I crossed my arms, standing firm. "A coward? You mean you've been letting Mom and Dad run your life? And mine? You've always let them treat me like crap, and you did nothing." "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "And I hate that. I hate seeing how they've treated you. But I didn't know how to stop it, Maddie. I didn't realize how bad it was until Kylie left." I paused, my heart softening just a little. "Kylie left?" "Yeah," he admitted. "She couldn't take it anymore. Mum's constant interference. Dad's obsession with control. I didn't see it before, but it all fell apart. And now I'm here, trying to pick up the pieces." I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. "I'm sorry, Ryan, but I don't think I can fix this for you anymore. You've had plenty of chances to speak up, and you didn't." He looked down at his shoes, a deep sigh escaping his lips. "I know, I've been a mess. But I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can forgive you. It's going to take time." Ryan nodded, his face etched with guilt. "I get that. I just wanted to say it. I never meant for things to get this bad." "I know," I said, my voice quiet. "But this isn't something I can fix for you. You have to do it yourself." He nodded again and walked away, and I stood in the doorway, watching him leave, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let him off the hook, but another part of me knew I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next few days were quiet. The calls from my parents stopped coming, replaced by awkward silence from relatives who'd heard about the fallout. I didn't care. I was finally starting to breathe. I focused on my work, pushing myself to do my best. I started reaching out to old friends I hadn't seen in years, trying to reconnect and build a life outside of the toxic environment I'd been trapped in for so long. Mike, an old friend from college, became a regular presence in my life, offering support without judgment. We started spending weekends together, talking about life, about where we'd been and where we were going. It felt good to have someone in my corner who didn't have an agenda, but there was still that nagging feeling, that small part of me wondering if I was doing the right thing. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if I was being too harsh, if maybe I should have just sucked it up and gone along with their demands. But then I'd remember Christmas. I'd remember the way my family had treated me, how they'd left me behind without a second thought, and I knew in my heart that I had made the right choice. The silence from my parents didn't last forever. One evening, I got a message from my mum, just a simple text, no apologies, just a request. "Maddie, we're in trouble. We need your help, please." I stared at the message for a long time, my emotions a tangled mess of resentment and sympathy. I wanted to help. I wanted to be the daughter they'd always wanted me to be. But then I thought about the years of manipulation, of being expected to give up everything for them without ever receiving anything in return. The decision was easy. I deleted the message and didn't look back. The next few months were about rebuilding. I focused on creating a life that was mine. independent, free from the guilt and control they had wrapped around me for years. I took small steps, working on my mental health, investing in my passions, and planning a future that didn't revolve around my family's needs. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, when the guilt crept in, when I'd wonder if I'd made a mistake. But then I'd remember that Christmas, the loneliness, the silence, and I knew that I'd made the right choice. I was finally free. Months passed, and with each passing day, I felt myself getting stronger. The quiet that once filled my apartment now felt like peace. It was hard at first, adjusting to life on my own after so many years of constantly bending to my family's will. But as time went on, I found a rhythm. The feeling of waking up each day in a space that was mine, where I wasn't walking on eggshells, was something I hadn't known I needed until I had it. I started to rediscover things I had long forgotten about myself, things like my love for painting, which had been buried beneath the weight of family obligations for years. I enrolled in a weekend painting class, and even though I was terrible at first, it felt good to do something just for me. I spent Sundays in the park, reading books without worrying about someone barging into my space to ask for help with something. It was the first time in my adult life that I felt truly myself again. In the middle of all this change, I met someone new, Jason, a colleague from work. He was kind, patient, and most importantly, he respected my boundaries. We spent long evenings talking about our hopes for the future, sharing the dreams we'd set aside while dealing with the chaos of our own lives. It was refreshing to talk to someone who listened, who didn't make me feel guilty for wanting to put myself first. We grew closer, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was allowed to experience love, without strings attached, without expectations that I had to give up my own life to support someone else's. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Jason and I started talking about the future more seriously, and I found myself making plans again, real plans, not ones based on other people's demands. I set goals for my career, for the life I wanted to create, and for the happiness I had spent so long chasing. One evening, while we were sitting on my couch, Jason asked me if I had thought about marriage. It wasn't something I had given much thought to before, especially after the divorce, but something about his steady presence made me reconsider. We talked about it casually at first, then more seriously. And before I knew it, we were planning our wedding. I wanted something small, intimate, and real. Jason was completely on board. We settled on a venue in a small town on the coast, with a handful of friends and family. I was determined to keep it simple. No drama, no expectations. Just two people starting fresh, surrounded by love. The wedding day arrived, and as I walked down the aisle, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being asked to sacrifice myself. I wasn't letting anyone dictate what my happiness should look like. This day was mine, and it felt exactly like it was supposed to, perfect in its imperfection. The family, as expected, didn't show up. I wasn't surprised. I had already decided that I wouldn't let them back in unless they acknowledged how they had treated me. But as I stood there with Jason, hand in hand, the absence of their voices was strangely freeing. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had found my own path, and it was enough. A few months after the wedding, I received a letter from my mum. It was brief, but the words hit harder than I expected. "I'm sorry, Maddie. We've been reflecting on everything. I know we made mistakes. I hope you're happy, and if you ever feel like talking, I'm here." I stared at the letter for a long time. Part of me felt tempted to reach out, to open the door to reconciliation. But another part of me, the part that had fought so hard for my own space, for my own life, knew that I had moved on. The door was still open, but I wasn't going to chase them through it. If they wanted to be a part of my life again, it had to be on my terms. In the end, the lesson I took away from it all was clear. I am enough. I always have been. I'd spent so many years trying to prove my worth to my family, trying to earn their love and approval. But in the process, I had lost myself. When I finally stopped trying to please them and started living for myself, everything shifted. Now, I was building a life that was mine and mine alone, one where I was no longer a backup plan, one where I was enough just as I was. And that, more than anything, was the most freeing feeling in the world. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And I was finally okay with that. Story 2. Okay, so things have been pretty wild at home lately. It all started a few months before my 18th birthday. Life with my mum, Eleanor, and stepdad, John, had always been, well, normal. Nothing exciting, just the usual family stuff. But then John decided to have a serious talk with me. I figured it would be about chores or something, but nope, he dropped a bomb. He told me that once I turned 18, I should start paying rent. Rent. In my own house. Yeah, you heard that right. See, the thing is, this house belonged to my dad, my biological dad. He passed away when I was 6, but he left the house to me in his will. So technically I've owned this place since I was a kid. I was speechless. I thought he was joking at first, but he was dead serious. So, I calmly explained to him, the house actually belongs to me. My dad left it to me when he passed away. And you know what he did? He laughed, like I just told him the funniest joke ever. I was so confused and kind of angry. This is my house. I had to explain it all over again, and finally, he got it. The look on his face was priceless, like he couldn't believe it. Later, I found out that my mum never told him the house was mine. Like, they've been married for years, and she never mentioned it. Seriously? Anyway, John tried to backpedal, saying he just wanted to teach me responsibility. Responsibility? By making me pay rent in my own house? Yeah, okay. The next morning I decided to drop my own bomb. Well, since the house is mine, I said casually at breakfast, I think it's only fair that you and Mum start paying rent if you want to keep living here after I turn 18. The look on his face was pure gold. He was totally caught off guard. He started sputtering about how it wasn't fair, and we're family. Suddenly, he's all about family. This guy wanted me to pay rent in my own house, but when the tables are turned, it's unfair. Things got heated. He stormed off, and my mum pulled me aside later, saying I was being too harsh and that I was going to tear the family apart. Seriously? He was the one who started all this. The tension in the house was thick. John barely spoke to me, and my mum pretended everything was normal, but it wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on, something they weren't telling me. The awkward silence stretched on for days. John kept shooting me these weird looks, like he was trying to figure me out, or maybe just silently fuming. My mum, well, she just floated around like a ghost, pretending nothing had happened. It was driving me crazy. Then, one morning, I overheard her on the phone. She didn't know I was there, so she was talking low, but I caught bits and pieces. Something about, he won't understand, and John doesn't want to tell him yet. My heart started pounding. What weren't they telling me? I tried to listen closer, but she must have realized I was there because she quickly changed the subject and hung up. Later that day, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her. Mum, who were you talking to on the phone this morning? What aren't you telling me? She looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. She tried to brush it off, but I pressed her. Finally, she sat down, looking defeated. There's something I need to explain, she started. But just then, John walked in. Of course. Perfect timing. He immediately sensed the tension. My mom clammed up, saying we'd talk later. I was so frustrated. What the heck was going on? Why were they acting like I couldn't handle the truth? The next day, I decided to play detective. I started watching them, paying attention to their every move. That's when I noticed John was acting even stranger than usual. He was sneaking around, going through papers in my mum's office, and even meeting with some random guy at a coffee shop. I followed him. Yeah, I know, not my proudest moment, and saw them talking seriously, John handing the guy some papers. What was he up to? That night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. At dinner, I blurted out, John, who was that guy you met at the coffee shop? What's going on? He choked on his food, denying everything. But I wasn't letting it go. I'm not stupid, John. You've been acting shady for weeks. What the hell is going on? Finally, my mom broke down. Tears streaming down her face, she said, Lucas, the house isn't as secure as you think. Your dad left it to you, yes, but there's a mortgage. A big one. And we've been struggling to keep up with the payments. My stomach dropped. What? Why didn't they tell me this sooner? John chimed in, saying they didn't want to worry me. Worry me? They let it get to this point without saying anything? I was furious. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my own house, felt like a lie. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. A mortgage. How much were they talking about? Why didn't they tell me sooner? I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. The next morning, I cornered my mum. How much debt are we talking about? How far behind are you on the payments? She looked like she wanted to disappear. Lucas, it's about $80,000. We've been behind for almost a year. $80,000. My jaw hit the floor. How could you let it get to that point without saying anything? I didn't want you to worry, she mumbled, which just made me angrier. Like, seriously. Drop an $80,000 bomb on me when I turn 18? That's not helpful. Then I realized something even worse. John had been sneaking around, trying to fix the situation himself. I confronted him. John, what are you doing about the house? He finally confessed. I've been looking into getting a second mortgage or refinancing. A second mortgage. Was he insane? We were already drowning in debt. That's a terrible plan, John. You're just making things worse. He didn't have an answer. Of course he didn't. I stormed off, needing to clear my head. I walked for hours, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to sell the house, just get rid of the debt and be done with it. But this was my dad's house. Selling it felt like giving up on him, on the last piece of him I had left. That night, I started researching. Mortgages, debt relief, selling houses, anything that might give me a way out. It was overwhelming, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust John to handle this. He was only making things worse. The next day, I called a financial advisor. He laid out my options, sell the house or negotiate a payment plan with the bank. Neither option was great, but at least I had a clearer picture. I told my mum and John we weren't taking out a second mortgage. We were either selling or negotiating a payment plan. John grumbled, but he knew I was right. The meeting with the bank was tense. We sat down with this advisor, and I laid it all out. $80,000 in debt. House in my name. No one told me until now. The advisor explained our options. A payment plan that could last 10-15 years, or selling the house and hoping it covered the debt. John, predictably, pushed for the payment plan. But I wasn't ready to make a decision. We left the bank with a lot to think about. That night, I stared at my computer screen, the numbers swimming before my eyes. 15 years of payments. It felt like a lifetime. And then, an idea hit me. What if I didn't sell the house, but rented it out? It was a long shot, but maybe I could keep the house, pay off the debt with rental income, and still hold on to my dad's legacy. I started researching, and the more I learned, the more it seemed like the best option. The next morning, I told my mum. She was hesitant, but agreed to give it a try. John, of course, wasn't happy, but I ignored him. This was my plan, and I wasn't going to let him ruin it. I got the house ready, listed it online, and within days, I had people wanting to see it. I showed the house to a few potential tenants, and finally found the perfect couple, Sam and Jess. They were young, responsible, and excited about the house. Just when I thought things were finally looking up, I got a call from the bank. There was a lien on the house. My mum had taken out a loan against the property years ago, and never told me. The amount owed? Nearly $50,000, on top of the $80,000 mortgage. I was devastated. We were in way over our heads. I confronted my mom, and she apologized, but that didn't change the fact that we were now facing a $130,000 debt. Renting the house wasn't going to be enough. I felt like giving up. But then I remembered my dad, and everything he'd worked for. This house was more than just a building. It was my connection to him, my future, everything I'd ever known. I wasn't going to let it go without a fight.